This is Taking the Lead, a podcast for B2B tech professionals, leaders, and executives who want to learn from female icons in the tech industry. In each episode, host Christina Brady interviews women who are driving revenue for some of the most respected tech companies in the world. Are you ready to get inspired?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Taking the Lead. I'm your host. I am Christina Brady. I am the SVP of Sales at Speckit, where we help make every rep, CSM, and BDR your best rep, CSM, and BDR. And I am so excited to welcome my incredible guest today, long time coming, Miss Stephanie Middaugh. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Drilling into this conversation, I'm so glad that you were open to it. Avoiding the spoilers of what we're about to get into, I would love to hear your journey. You are currently the head of global enablement at Pinecone, and you have such a wonderful story at some incredible organizations as to how you got there. Tell us the tale of how you got where you are.
Oh, it's a windy road.
Good.
Per usual. I have yet to meet an enablement person that has like similar stories, which for me personally, I love it. Let's see. My story begins way back when I was like just a young little thing. So
Like how young? Are we like a baby? Is this when you're a
I
baby?
mean, so I wanted to be a school teacher ever since I was a kid. So I remember like I used to play school, I would be the teacher. So it was like ingrained in me from like a young age that I just wanted to be a teacher when I was growing up. The grade always changed on what I wanted to teach, but that was like it was the thing. Went to college, I was like I'm going to teach high school English. That's my jam all day long. And then in true, I think millennial fashion, I had like a like a pre-quarter life crisis about like a semester before I was due to student teach. And I was like, I don't think I could do this anymore. Like, I don't know what I want to do, but like, I can't do this anymore. And I panicked like you do. And I moved back home and decided to like finish my college credits basically at a community college, save myself some money, and then like tried to find the first job that would take me essentially. And the only experience I had at the time was being a receptionist. And I was lucky. I know, like I was 22, like, I think I was, like, 22 years old. I only had receptionist experience. I was living in Orange County at the time, and a, like, old school ERP software company kinda snatched me up, and I remember I had, like, $200 left in the bank. My student loans were like, "You're not in school full time anymore, like, we're gonna need you to start
Yes.
paying us back." My car payment was, like, I had all of these things, like, on the horizon, and I was crapping my pants, like, metaphorically speaking, obviously, or hopefully, but
You
it
never
was like
know. When you're in your
right.
early 20s, yes, weird things
Safe
happen. Yeah.
space, right? Safe
It's
space.
space here. That's right.
Um, but basically, like, so the ERP software company picked me up. I didn't negotiate my salary, like, they gave me a really lowball offer, which at the time, I didn't know was a lowball offer, like, I'm 22, it's my first big girl job, I thought it was amazing, like, it was great, and I was like, "Yes, I will take it, I will, like, 100%." And I got in there and I worked as a receptionist, I think for like a month and a half. And I kept asking my manager at the time, I was like, do you have anything else? Like, I'm kind of bored. Like, there's not a lot to do. So they ended up moving me like back office like a month and a half after I had started to essentially do like deal desk order processing kind of stuff for our channel partners. I had a great experience there at the organization. I was there for like 6 years. It gave me like an incredible solid foundation for I think just like how business like works and runs and channel ecosystems and like all of the stuff that like at the time I was like I don't even know like I didn't know that this was going to be a big thing, but I now like fast forward to like now I look back on that experience as like holy shit, like can I curse on this podcast, is that okay?
Yeah, you totally can. It's just there's nobody
Okay,
listening. No, I'm kidding.
okay,
There's a
good,
lot of
yeah.
people listening and we all swear. Let's do it.
Amazing. I curse like a sailor a lot of times, but I wanna make sure, like,
Me
it's,
too.
like,
Me
on the
too.
up and up. Okay. So, like, all of that experience was amazing. I got my first dipped my toe in the startup world in 2016, I wanna say, at a data analytics company that was based out of Orange County, Alteryx, if anybody listening
Oh
is
yeah.
familiar with it. I think they were like 300 people at the time that I joined. I was there for 2.5 years, I think, and I saw them through their IPO, which again was like phenomenal. Like the culture, the people, like everything was it was kind of a magical place, to be honest with you. Like, it was just one of those experiences that was amazing. And being so young in my career for startup, I thought every startup was like this.
That's how
Like,
they all are.
this is
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, who wouldn't love to be part of a start?
Amazing. You're gonna IPO, you're gonna have this incredible experience. It's how they
Every
all are,
single
every one of
time.
them.
Yeah, every single time. Spoiler alert, it's not the case.
As it turns out.
It is not the case. Anyway, so found my way into enablement at that organization. I ended up getting pulled back into like sales operations for like a hot second. And there was a moment in time I was helping out with a sales kickoff and facilitating like a session or something. And I was like, I should be doing this full time. Like, I should be doing enablement full time. Like, operations, I'm good at it, but I don't love it. Like, this is what I need to be doing. So, long story short, now I'm like solely focused on enablement. I'm at Pinecone now. This is my third time starting up enablement from scratch, like at a hypergrowth startup, which I think I'm a glutton for punishment at this point for doing it
Like
several
me.
times
Yeah.
now. But it's been exciting. Like earlier this year I went through, this is kind of it'll lead into our conversation later, but I was laid off earlier this year along with so many other incredibly talented enablement folks. And it hit me pretty hard. Like, it was definitely like a kick in the gut for sure. I did consulting for about 6 months earlier this year, and that was super exciting. And then now I'm here. Now I'm at Pinecone and super excited. We're growing like crazy, and it's gonna be a wild ride. I'm super stoked for it.
Oh my gosh. And it's like you couldn't be a better person for it. One, because you've done it before. You understand what happens.
Mhm.
Going back to the experience that led you to finding a new home here, why do you feel like enablement is always on the chopping block when it comes time to cut? Why do you think it feels like such an expendable role? Because you and I both know that
Yeah.
it's not, and it's a
Yeah.
critical error to make. But why does it always feel like a nice to have when we know it's a need to have?
I have so many spicy opinions on this.
Just take I want them all of them, every one of them. Spice me up.
Uh, on it, like, I think at the end of the day, I think, like, if I'm putting myself in somebody else's shoes, like higher pay grade than me and like looking at the spreadsheets and whatever, enablement, because we are aligned underneath revenue, go to market, sales, like wherever kind of your alignment goes. At the end of the day, like our role and our function adds to customer acquisition cost because we are under that band, that organization. For better or worse, like we need to be there, but it's oftentimes why you see enablement get slashed and like L&D is not, because L&D is under the HR bucket more often than not. And a lot of times it like they're typically shielded at least from the initial kind of like cut. But and I think it's we need to be aligned under revenue. We need to be aligned under sales. We need to be tightly aligned with them. So it doesn't make sense for us to be realigned. But I remember when I was at Alteryx and we were going IPO, inevitably, like you look to reduce your customer acquisition costs and they kind of moved stuff and like reorged a bunch of stuff in order to, clear balance sheets and the super typical. And I remember at the time, like enablement had been realigned under human resources just for like all of the pieces. And I think, like, for whatever reason, when it was hitting earlier this year, it just, like, reminded me of that instance, and I was like, "Shit, that's why." Like, that's why this is happening is because they need to really quickly lower customer acquisition costs because that's what the board is looking for. That's what, like, investors are looking at. That's what everything is kind of happening, but we've been through this cycle twice now. Like, COVID was one. I saw everybody get hit really hard in enablement, especially during COVID. Everybody panicked. And then this, like, recession that, like, didn't happen, is gonna who the fuck knows? Like,
Yeah.
everything is, like, all of a sudden it's, but I'm seeing the companies that, like, laid off entire enablement teams, I'm seeing them pop back up, and they're starting to hire enablement again, and it sucks. I'm glad they're doing it, like, I'm glad they're realizing that, like, "Yeah, we do need this function," but it sucks that you had to, like, completely wipe it out, and now
Got
this
it.
person that comes back in has to, like, start from scratch or maybe, like, piece together stuff from, like, the poor soul that was, like, let go before. Like, it's just crazy and, like, ramping up into it. So, also, I think that it's ill-defined across the board, and we know this. Like, enablement is different at a lot of different companies. People think about what enablement should be doing as, like, wildly all over the spectrum in a lot of cases, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're just kind of seeing as a nice to have, and it's just like
Yeah.
and I think if you talk to like a CRO, you talk to like leaders, most of them are like, yeah, we know we need it, but my hands are tied. And I think it's just like from like a corporate perspective, it just blows. Like they know they need it, but they have like, who else are we gonna like? What else are we gonna do? Who else are we gonna cut? It sucks. It sucks. It sucks. It sucks.
Well, it's one of those roles where it feels like it's easy to just say, "We're gonna have somebody else at the organization cover this," right? So they're like, the end
Right.
result of the work that you do is so important, but do we really need a person to do that, or could we buy a tool to do
Right.
that, or could we roll out a new like policy? Do you also find that a lot of organizations use enablement and L&D synonymously when in fact they are not?
A lot of time, and to be honest, there's a crap ton of overlap between the
Yeah.
two functions. Usually enablement is in an organization at this point in time, like earlier than L&D. Like L&D comes into play with like more mature organizations and larger organizations. But I do see like there is a lot of overlap between the things that we do, but enablement is forced in a lot of ways to be
Yeah.
way faster than L&D is, and usually L&D is focused on those soft skills and like rolling out stuff like that instead of like, hey, we're looking at our win rates against this competitor, we need to improve whatever X percent or whatever it is. Like typically they don't go to L&D for something like that. So like there is overlap, but not like not like a lot, I guess.
Well, it's I mean, if you think about it, every role in go-to-market has their elements of overlap, right? Like
Oh,
when
for
I'm
sure.
approaching my everyday, I couldn't do my job without my ops counterpart or my marketing counterpart, but those feel so distinguished even though there is that overlap, and it just keeps bringing me
Mhm.
back to this idea that so many organizations don't know how to properly measure
Yeah.
a non-direct revenue driving capacity, right? It's like, okay, I know how to measure my AEs.
Yep.
I think I know how to measure my CSMs. I know how to manage my BDRs and I can measure
Yep.
their managers. But then a role like enablement, which is absolutely a part of the revenue organization, companies don't know how to measure them. And so then they
Right.
confuse them in the overlap. So, what do you feel like has been some of the really wonderful ways that you've seen enablement measured in your career? And then what are
Mhm.
some of the ones that you feel like are not as helpful, but
Yeah.
often get pulled in and almost distract?
Yeah. Loaded questions.
I know. I told
Let
you, I
me
was like, I'm gonna
let me
peel you apart.
sit up for this one.
Yeah. Just sit up, take a deep breath, roll the shoulders. Let's get into it.
So I see in a lot of cases like I'll like underline all of this with you can do everything right. You can prove value, you can prove impact, you can do all of the things. I've been there where I'm like, hell yeah, like I am kicking ass and taking names. Like, look at all the things that I'm, accomplishing and doing. And then all of a sudden it's like, nope, we're we're good. So, like, caveat to all of this of like, even though I'm seeing the market shift in a positive direction for enablement, you can do all of the right things and still sometimes it's not enough. So like just like s- just kind of a little pin in that piece. However, one of the things that I see a lot of young enablement professionals or even like inexperienced enablement professionals kind of go to is I had X number of people attend my training and like therefore like I did the thing. And to
Uh-huh.
me, it's just like checkbox enablement of I had 90% of the team attended my training and we had decent engagement. When I was consulting, I was working with a client and I was hearing them say, well, we have pretty good engagement on the weekly enablement calls. And I was like, what does engagement mean? Like define that term for me. And they were like, well, they ask questions. And I was like, that doesn't mean it's engaging though. Like that doesn't and I've seen some enablement professionals before just kind of like and no like shade to any of them. You're just kind of like grasping at what they can grasp a hold of. It's just like, okay, we had X number of people attend, or like they got X percent, right on the test that we gave them, or whatever it is. That's not enough though. Like, are they actually going just because I can regurgitate an elevator pitch or just because I can go through and answer a multiple choice question? We learned this in school, like with like the SAT 9 questions and tests that we took like throughout school, or maybe that's a millennial thing. It doesn't mean I actually learned the stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I can come and like memorize a book and like speak eloquently to something and you could think I'm like Neil deGrasse Tyson, and all of a sudden you ask me like a question that's like to apply it, and I'm like, oh no, I can't do that. So it's a very different thing of you can't just say they attended the training, they took the test, ta-da, like aren't I amazing? Like it's not enough. And I've started breaking out my enablement metrics into like three kind of different buckets. One of the buckets is like things that I'm accountable for or to. It's a little bit fuzzy and it can be a little bit fuzzy, but it's more, linked than some other metrics. So accountable metrics are things like new hire ramp time. So are we bringing new hires on board and ramping them, however you define ramp, accordingly or like faster than the ones who came before them or before the program was implemented? Are we making a direct impact based on the programs and stuff that we're asking to make? So one of my last companies, we were trying to break into a new persona that we were, selling into basically. And I rolled out an entire training initiative around, okay, we're going to talk about this persona. What do they care about? What are their struggles? What are their pain points? How does our product solve for those? What negotiation techniques do you need to be watching out for? What types of triggers should you be listening for? Like all of those things. And then success was defined at the beginning of the initiative of we want more meetings booked by our BDRs with this persona. We want to see more closed one deals booked as a result of whatever it was. So like then I go into Salesforce and, pull some reports and look at all those things. Now you'll have some people that are listening to this might be like, well, Stephanie, that's, correlation doesn't equal like isn't causation kind of a situation. Yes, 100%. Is it my enablement training that did it, or is it the spiff that was, like, aligned with the initiative of, like, the more stuff you get, then whatever, like, that's a hard line to kind of walk of what was the thing that propelled these win rates or these closed won or the meetings held. That nuance becomes really difficult to kind of walk, but that's part of my story. And I don't lay it out of like my enablement initiative kicked ass and yeah, like I did everything and it's because of me that you got all of these close one deals with this new persona. I paint the entire picture and I think all of these pieces are a piece of the reason why we did the thing or accomplished X result. You're going to hear other enablement professionals talk about like quantitative versus qualitative metrics, things like that. And I
Mhm.
honestly, I think it boils down to what problem are you trying to solve? Can you measure that in some way, shape, or form? Is it soft skill training and you need to like, can you tie that to any initiative that you're trying to accomplish? And then, so accountable metrics, these are things that like I can in some way, shape, or form at least align myself to. I had some kind of impact in some way, shape, or form to this metric. The other metrics that I like to look at are what I call trackable metrics, which are things that like I probably don't have direct impact on. However, they're going to give me really great insight and keep me like with my finger on the pulse basically of like what's happening in the business. Are we seeing customer churn? Are we seeing deals falling out of the sales cycle? I don't have direct impact on those things. However, the skills that my reps need and or like should have are going to have a direct impact on those things. So like that might give me some insight into areas that maybe we need a training here, we need to beef up there, whatever that kind of looks like. And then the third bucket that I tend to look at is kind of that sentiment from the reps, which is how do you feel? Like, do you feel prepared to speak to the value propositions of this new product? Do you feel confident in holding your own demo without a solutions engineer on like the first call, those kinds of things? And I think
Mm.
all of those pieces together, like they can say, God love them. I love salespeople, but they'll just kind of like puff out, and they'll be like, hell yeah, I know all of this. And then you go and like look at the actual, and you're like, well, you're not doing it though. Like I don't see the things. Or you'll see
Yeah.
the people that are just like kind of sandbagging a little bit, and you're like, dude, you're kicking ass at this. Like let's highlight this
More.
across the board. So feels combined with like the qualitative versus quantitative kind of metrics that I think ideally should give you like a really good kind of story basically to kind of tell to your executives, boards, interviewees, like whoever it is that you're kind of like telling this podcast host,
Me.
Yeah.
I heard speaking of me, I heard so many amazing things that you laid out, and one of them is so many of the non-revenue metrics, it's really easy for someone to look at that and say, "Okay, well, so what?" Like, to your
Yeah.
point, We had a bunch of people attend a training. So what? We had
Yeah.
a bunch of people who raised their hands and spoke up. So what? We have a
Yeah.
bunch of people who can memorize a script or an elevator pitch or who can copy and paste an email template. So
Yeah.
what? And
Yeah.
the so what part that you're answering is one, I'm hearing you talk a lot about not only inspection of the work that was done, but also ingrainment, right? I
Mhm.
taught you that. Now, how are you using it? And what leading
Yeah.
indicators am I using to know if it's off or if it's on, right? Like
Yeah.
so many folks just look at the trailing indicators. Are we hitting the number? Is the ASP where we want it to be? Are we penetrating into the right markets? Are we using messaging that's turning people off or not, right? It's all of
Mhm.
these like, oh, well, I guess that customer's lost. That's done. What you're talking about is actually ingraining the right behavior by looking at leading indicators, right? It's like predicting the outcome. And
Yeah.
that makes it a lot easier to say, okay, well, so what? Okay, well, so if I have 50 people who attend a training, after that training, here's how I'm going to inspect to make sure that they're using it. Here's the metrics that I'm expecting to move because of attending that training. And if they don't, I know that person either didn't show up, didn't understand it, don't have the skills, or don't have the behavior, right? So
Yep.
it's that other piece, but I often find that it's almost on the onus of the enablement executive to train the organization to look at their role that way.
Yeah.
Because I don't hear a lot of revenue leaders proactively measuring their enablement people that way.
Yeah.
And they need to, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it makes it easy to cut.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's a challenge. I actually one of the most frustrating like roles that I was in was I saw a colleague of mine. They were tying their impact for it was like this person, this rep or these reps attended these trainings that I hosted, and then the rep hit quota. Therefore, like my
Who's that?
trainings like help them do it. And I was like, I mean, I mean, what? Like that's I I was an English major for a reason. Like I am not a math person. I'm not a big numbers person by any means. Even I could kind of see. I was like, that's a real big leap that's happening like there. And I've seen those kinds of leaps try and take place. And really, really challenging. And it's no wonder that then you find really jaded kind of sales leadership CROs that are like enablement is bullshit. Like, why do I need it? Like I
They're
ran
sales
across
managers. They'll just
yeah.
coach.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't need it. They're just onboarding folks or whatever. And it just like it hurts my heart. I was chatting with a CRO years ago and he went off on a whole tangent about how enablement sucks and it's not worth it. And it's just kind of a like a whole thing. And I like I remember, like, I just kinda paused for a second, I was like, "Who hurt you? Like, who in like, who hurt you, like,
Why are you
in your
like
past?" And, by the end of the call, when I was explaining, like, what enablement, like, can and should kind of look like, he was like, "Oh, shit." Like, "Okay." Like, now I kind of understand what the deal is, and you've kinda, like, won me and I was like, "There you go." Like, this is yes, this is what it needs to be. But it's it sucks. It's just
Yeah. Well, and again, it's because it's such a broad job as well. Because one of the things that we've been talking about is just this idea of like, I am training, I am inspecting. There's also another whole part of it that comes with program management and event planning, right? Like,
Yep.
why do things like that often fall under enablement's purview? Like, the last two out of three companies, enablement was like planning President's Club
Yeah.
and sales kickoff. And it's like
Yeah.
enablement is running that. Why do you think that falls there? And do you think that that's the right place?
Oh, I think inevitably it falls to enablement. I did a presentation on this at Sales Enablement Collective Summit a couple of months ago, and I used the phrase like shit rolls downhill, right? At the end of the day. And enablement, more often than not, unfortunately, is at like the base of the hill and we just kind of collect all of the other shit. Also, by nature, we're helpful people. Like that's just like
Yeah.
we are, and inevitably, it's just like it just one thing gets kinda, like, thrown off, and I think at the end of the day, I like, I've been at the companies where usually kickoff is owned by enablement. Now, to varying degrees. Are we talking, like, full event coordination and planning? One of my last companies that I was at, I had to do, like I had to book the hotel, I had to figure out the menu, I had to coordinate transportation, I had to, like, do all of the things if you don't have like events marketing, like, sure, I guess I'll take it,
Guess you'll take.
but then I've been at the other companies where they do like somebody else owns all of the logistics for the event. And then enablement comes in and we're responsible for the content. Like, let's set the agenda, let's figure out the trainings, let's figure out the flow, like that kind of stuff. I think it's a necessary evil. Like right now, so I'm a team of one. We're a go to market organization of 20 people, I think, like at the present moment. And everybody's just like scrapping together all of the stuff. So at the present moment, it makes sense for me to own these pieces. It does. Larger organizations, like when I was at Zoom or whatever, if somebody came to me and was like, "You're in charge of like figuring everything out," I'd be like,
You're gonna do
no,
so.
guarantee that's not, no, guarantee there's somebody else that way better that can like take care of this. So for me, it's just kind of like what makes the most sense. And just because you do it this year doesn't mean you should also do it next year. President's Club also super common. And I think that one should more sit on like revenue operations, I think, because they're the ones that are going to usually come up with the metrics and tracking the metrics and like figuring out like who's qualified and all of that kind of stuff. But shit rolls downhill. That's the simplest answer I have for you, and usually we're at the base of that hill.
Yeah, usually you're right down there catching it. You got a basket that's not big enough. And do you also feel like maybe it's because enablement is sort of the crux of building so many cross-functional relationships? Like
Yeah,
that's the other thing is when you think about enablement being the heart of an organization is you have to have these broad cross-functional relationships and have a scope of everything going on, especially because rarely do you have the opportunity to have an enablement person per role, we'll
yeah.
call it. Like, I remember at a prior organization when we finally got role specific enablement, it was like
Oh,
Christmas because the
yeah.
enablement team was like, I got to support everybody. And we have a hiring class of 65 people across
Yep,
5 different roles, and they're all in one big hiring class jammed together.
yep.
And we have 2 weeks to train and enable everybody and figure out how to do it. And it was ultimately
Yeah.
ineffective.
Yep.
Like I've so wait. Have you been there? Have you had the am I explaining your
So
experience?
so many times. Like, so many times. Role specific enablement is my dream. And it usually comes again much more mature organizations, larger organizations, which makes sense. But it's that constant kind of feeling of like, oh, I'm not doing enough. And it's true, like team of one, team of anything less than like five at an organization, guaranteed, like, no, you're not doing enough.
You're not.
I'm gonna go like cry in the corner for like half an hour and then I'll come back and like just, pick myself back up again and do it all over again. But yeah, it just it's you need like the justification in order to like have the head count, but you can't get the justification unless you have it's like this weird chicken or egg kind of scenario of we need the support, but we need to justify the support, especially to finance. Like that's always the blocker on everything, which is fine. They're doing their jobs, that's what they're meant to do. But it's yeah, yeah, it's just
When you say justify the support, like that hits me right in the feels because it's one thing to be doing a job that is so broad and so important and has so many facets. And it's another to feel like every single day you're having to justify your existence, right? You're like, I am immersed in every single bucket here. And yet every
yeah,
day I'm feeling like I have to justify the very existence of my role being here.
yeah,
So, how would you say if you are just starting at enablement at a new organization or maybe doing a lot of what you're doing, which is starting kind of the founding enablement team?
yeah.
What are some of the things that you feel like right out of the bat you will go to your leader and say, here's how I want you to measure me? Like if you had to pick 3 things to start to teach an organization how to measure enablement, what would the 3 things be? I know
I
you have your
think
3 buckets, but like
yeah.
KPIs.
I think the first things that enablement needs to kind of like get down like proper is every single initiative that you have, whether it's onboarding, whether it's you're rolling out a new tool, whether it's a new process or something that you're helping enable the team on, you always have to figure out like how is success defined for this initiative and how are we going to measure it in some way shape or form. If it's a new tool, if it's a new process, it could be as simple as like we're reducing the number of like support tickets that the revenue operations is getting from as a result of like this process being more like socialized or something like that, and then figuring out at the end of the day like what makes sense. And I hate using the term like it depends, but like every organization that I've been at is a little bit different. So like I can't come in here with like a silver bullet and say like, "Oh, these are the top 3 things that you should always be measured on." My time at like Zoom versus like Divi versus Ultrix versus Pinecone, like every little thing, like there's something a little bit different and nuanced that the organization needs. And I would say that's a really good starting conversation with your executive team, with your manager, whoever that might kind of be that you roll up to, is like, what is the support that you're looking for? And then like, how do we measure me against that support specifically and define it very well for your organization? Ultimately, that's going to live in an enablement charter at the end of the day of just like, here's what enablement at X company means. Here's what it looks like. Here's our expectations of the enablement team. Here's what we're going to be kind of like graded or evaluated on a regular basis. And then iterate on that as your company moves, scales, grows, whatever it kind of looks like. Make sure that it's set to, because their enablement is such a fluctuating role
Yeah.
in general. Like it needs to be defined for your company and where your company is at in that quarter, in that year, like ideally in the year, like the annual year. But that's, in my opinion, that's where it should kind of sit, like you need to have that conversation and like sit down with everybody and get a consensus across the board.
Whew, there it is. Sit down with everybody and get a consensus across the board. I also was loving all of the incredible companies that you dropped that you've worked for and gone to build for. Every single one of those is successful and amazing organization. And so you heard it here. The people that you have enabling your teams will make or break the organization. And I feel like you and I could drill into that so much more, but
Yeah,
we are reaching the end of our time together where I have a couple of rapid reveal questions
I'm so
to ask
excited.
to you if you're on board.
I'm so excited for these.
Excellent. You have 60 seconds or less to answer each, but you
Okay.
can break that rule. It's a loose rule. Okay, so
Okay.
number one, if you could do any other job in the world, what would that job be and why?
Hands down, I would be a meteorologist, which is probably like way off. Nobody expects this, but I am a total weather nerd. I love everything about it. Like my goal in life is to go like tornado chasing at some point. Like they've got those tours and stuff. Twister's my
Like the
favorite
movie
movie.
Twister?
Yes, it is my
I'm telling
favorite
you.
movie of all time.
Yes.
Unfortunately for me, I said this earlier, like I am not a math person and meteorology requires a fair amount of like up through like calculus 3 and I just am not about that life.
That wasn't going to be you.
So if I could do anything else, if I could just like get the math in my brain, 100% that's what I would do is I would work for NOAA. I would go and like forecast all day long. I don't want to be like a weather girl necessarily, but I would be like storm chaser, like extraordinaire. I want to be Helen Hunt in Twister. That's what I want.
I mean, honestly, I didn't see Helen Hunt as being some sort of math aficionado. You just gotta have you gotta have a guy or a gal in the chair. You know, like you
Yeah,
gotta have the person that is looking and they're like, oh,
somebody else.
this. And you're like, I'm gonna run after. Like you wanna be the person that
Yeah.
you wanna tie yourself to a pole and get in the
Yeah.
middle of a cyclone.
Yes, I
We
want to
don't
see
need
the
half of
cows.
that.
I want to see the cows
You
going
want it right. You
around.
want to what? We got
Yes.
cows.
Yes.
I feel like you and I could probably quote the entire movie. I had a
Oh, for
brief moment,
sure.
like while watching Twister, being like, "This is what I want to do with my life. I want to
Yeah.
do this." And then I was like, "Maybe
How do
not.
you watch Twister and you don't have that brief
I
moment of
don't want
like,
to do that."
should I go tornado chasing? Like it just like very quick. Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Moving to Oklahoma. All right, number two. What's an irrational fear of yours?
This one's kind of hilarious. So I am terrified of snakes, and my irrational fear is that there is going to be a snake in the toilet at some point when I like which is, to be honest with you, is why I probably will not be visiting like Australia or New Zealand or something because
It's
I
real.
hear
They
that
are.
that
There
yeah,
are snakes in the toilet there.
maybe even like Florida is
It's
like
a real
maybe not
fear.
my jam. So like for whatever reason, I like irrational fear of a snake like in a toilet,
Oof. I mean, like because you wouldn't see it, you would just feel it bite your butt.
especially
It's
like in the
bad.
middle of the night. You get up to go to the restroom and like it's dark. You don't like. I mean,
You got
come
your
on,
delicate
like
bits just right there.
right, right. It's just
Mhm.
exposed.
I mean, that's depending on where you live, that's extremely rational,
Yeah.
and I'm here for that. Number 3, what is one skill that you think everyone should learn?
Ooh. To be honest, I took a lot of psychology classes when I was in community college to just kind of like I find the human brain very fascinating. And I think honestly, like that's probably one of those skills that I think people should kind of like drill in on is like it's not even just like understanding the human brain. It's like how do other people think? How do you interact with other folks and everything like that? We've almost every company that I've been at, we've always done the Clifton Strengths Finder evaluation and stuff like that. I think it's super fascinating, and I think understanding like, my husband is, like, polar opposite of me when it comes to the way that his brain works and the way that he thinks and whatever, and, like, under as I got older with him, understanding, like, "Oh, like, that's where you're coming from." Like, I understand what so 100% skill is, like, getting to understand, like, other people's point of view, their view like, all of those things.
Ugh, that's a really good one. And you've just spent this incredible time sharing your point of view. I am better for it. I can imagine that given your wealth of experience and everything that you have done, folks are going to want to not only connect with you and get to know you a little bit more, but also learn more about what you're doing at Pinecone. So, where can
Yeah.
folks go and find you, connect with you, talk with you, take up your time?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. My like posts are all over LinkedIn. You can also find me on the Enablement Squad, which is the enablement community that I co-founded with Matt Shalsey. And then I also like just still have my like Phoenix go-to-market consulting kind of on the side. If that is ever a thing, I can put you in contact with other enablement consultants and stuff like that. So lots of ways to get a hold of me. Don't hesitate to reach out. I love talking with people.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here and giving us a little piece of your incredible mind.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
And that's all, folks.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Taking the Lead. If you're looking for more inspiring stories from women leaders in B2B tech, then visit us at motionagency.io/takingthelead.